Welcome to Psychology Truth. In today's video, we're diving into a story that's not just about heartbreak or victory. It's about transformation, resilience, and the power hidden behind the pain. Picture this: a woman who once stood beside a man she called her king. She loved him deeply. She gave him her loyalty, her energy, her dreams. But when he walked away without warning, without apology, her world shattered. He wasn't just her partner. He was her anchor, her reason, her guide. And when he left, he didn't just break her heart. He took her sense of purpose with him. Or so she thought. You see, this isn't a typical breakup story. It's not just about a woman who lost a man. It's about how that loss cracked open something far more powerful than anyone expected. Because in the shadows of that betrayal, in the silence of those sleepless nights, something began to shift inside her. Slowly, quietly, she began to remember who she was before she ever met him, and more importantly, who she could become without him. While he chased temporary distractions and shallow praise, she began building something real. At first, it was just survival, a morning walk to clear her mind, journaling her thoughts, saying no more often, letting go of what hurt. But soon her quiet healing turned into a storm of self-discovery. She didn't just recover, she evolved. She found strength in solitude. She found fire in her focus. And she found purpose in places that pain had once buried. She wasn't rebuilding the past. She was building something bigger. She was building her empire. But here's where it gets interesting. Because just as she started stepping into this new version of herself, powerful, poised, unstoppable, you walked in. You, the one who had no idea what she'd been through. You didn't see her tears on the bathroom floor. You didn't see the long nights, the therapy sessions, the hard conversations with herself. But you saw the result. You saw her power. And maybe you were drawn to it not because she was perfect, but because she had scars, and wore them with pride. This is where your story begins, not as a replacement for what she lost, but as a witness to what she's becoming. Maybe you're not trying to fix her. Maybe you're just trying to understand her. And in that process, something in you starts to change too. Because seeing someone rise from the ashes makes you wonder, what am I capable of if I stop holding back? But just when everything seems like it's falling into place, a message from the past appears. A voice she tried to forget. A secret she never told. And suddenly, the empire she's building is at risk. Not from weakness, but from the strength it took to survive. She hadn't spoken his name in months. Not because she couldn't, but because saying it out loud gave it power, and she had worked too hard to take her power back. To anyone on the outside, it looked like she was thriving, and in many ways, she was. Her days were filled with small victories: a job promotion, a new apartment, late-night conversations with friends who reminded her of her worth. But behind closed doors, there were still moments when the past crept in. A song on the radio, the smell of his old cologne on someone passing by. Little things, harmless on their own. But when strung together, they reopened a door she thought she had locked for good. What most people didn't know was how deep the betrayal went. It wasn't just a breakup, it was a collapse of trust, of shared dreams, of everything they had promised each other when no one else was listening. She had loved him through his worst, supported him when no one else believed in him. And in return, he left when she needed him most. There was no goodbye, just silence. And silence can be louder than screaming when it's filled with unanswered questions. So when your name first came up, she almost ignored it. She didn't want to feel again, didn't want to risk hoping. But you didn't show up with grand gestures or empty promises. You listened. You noticed the small things, how she paused before talking about her past, how she flinched slightly when someone mentioned love. You didn't push, you simply stayed. And slowly she let her guard down, not because she was ready, but because something about you felt safe, familiar, different. Still, nothing about this was simple, because just as she started to trust again, an unexpected message popped up on her phone. A name she had buried, a name she never thought she'd see again. At first, she froze. Her hands trembled as she read the words. It wasn't long, just a few sentences, but enough to shake the ground beneath her. He wanted to talk, to explain, to meet one last time. And now she was caught in a storm she didn't ask for. The man who shattered her is back, and the one who sees her clearly, who might actually be right for her, is still unaware of what's coming. What will she choose? What if she walks back into the fire thinking it's warmth? And what happens? And the one who sees her clearly, who might actually be right for her, is still unaware of what's coming. What will she choose? What if she walks back into the fire, thinking it's warmth? And what happens when you find out the truth she's been holding back all this time? She didn't reply to the message, not right away. She stared at it for hours, letting it sink in, trying to understand why now. Why, after all this time, after all the healing, he thought it was okay to reach out. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe he saw her glowing online, building something real, and realized what he'd lost. Or maybe it was just control, the kind of pull he always had over her, showing up when she was finally finding peace. Whatever it was, it worked. He got inside her head again, just like before. You started to notice something was off. Her smile wasn't as steady. Her voice, usually calm and clear, carried a weight it didn't have last week. She still showed up, still laughed at your jokes, still said she was fine. But something in her energy had shifted, and the truth is you felt it. You just didn't know what it meant yet. Meanwhile, he was watching. From a distance, maybe, or maybe closer than either of you realized. His message wasn't just a text, it was the beginning of something bigger, because what she hadn't told anyone was that their breakup wasn't clean. There were things left unfinished, things that could still pull her back if she wasn't careful. Money owed, secrets shared, a connection deeper than just romance. Trauma, after all, can bind people just as tightly as love. And now she's stuck between two versions of herself, the one that still wonders, what if, and the one who's finally stepping into her own power. And you're caught in the middle of a story you didn't even know had a beginning before you showed up. And the truth that's coming next might change everything, for both of you. She stood in front of the cafe, staring through the glass at the man she thought she'd never see again. He looked the same, confident, calm, like he hadn't left behind chaos. Her fingers trembled slightly as she reached for the door. This wasn't about feelings, at least that's what she told herself. This was closure, or maybe it was curiosity. Either way, she walked in. You, on the other hand, had no idea where she was. You had sent her a message earlier, something simple, thinking of you. But hours passed with no reply. It wasn't like her. She was usually quick, thoughtful, present. But now, silence. And somewhere deep down, you knew something was off. Your gut was talking to you, but you didn't want to jump to conclusions. Still, you started asking yourself the hard questions. Was she still holding on to something she hadn't told me? Inside the cafe, the conversation was tense. He didn't apologize, not really. Instead, he talked about how lost he was, how much he'd changed, how he regretted letting her go. His words were soft, calculated and familiar. That's what scared her most, how easily she could still read him. For a moment she forgot all the progress she made. For a moment the old version of her leaned forward, listening, hoping. But outside a storm was building, not just in the sky, but between timelines, past and present clashing in ways she couldn't control. She was about to make a choice, one that could pull her backward or launch her forward, and what she didn't know was that you were already on your way. Not because you didn't trust her, but because something inside you said this moment matters, and when you walk through that door, nothing will be the same again. She didn't expect to feel anything when she saw him, but there it was. Anger, confusion, and something else she didn't want to name. She kept telling herself it wasn't love, just leftover pieces of a life she no longer lived. His words were smooth, careful, like he'd practiced them. He talked about second chances, about timing, about how sometimes people need to fall apart to find each other again. And for a second, it sounded almost believable. But just as she opened her mouth to respond, her phone lit up on the table. Your name. A message. I'm outside. Her heart stopped. She hadn't told you where she was. And suddenly, it wasn't just about closure anymore. It was about being caught in a lie she never meant to tell. She stood up too fast, nearly knocking over her chair, and made her way to the door. Her ex called after her, but she didn't turn around. Not yet. You were standing just a few feet away, your face calm, but your eyes searching. When she stepped out, the air between you changed. You didn't need to ask where she'd been. The look in her eyes told you enough, but before either of you could speak, the door behind her opened, and he stepped out. That's when it happened. The twist no one saw coming. He didn't just recognize you. He knew you, from years ago, from another life. A past business deal gone wrong, a fallout, a betrayal. Not romantic, but personal, deep. You had history, and not the kind people forget. Now everything she thought she understood was spinning. You weren't just a new chapter, you were tied to the old one. The pain she tried to leave behind wasn't just standing in front of her, it was between you two, and no one had said a word about it until now. You looked at him, he looked at you, neither of you moved, and she was stuck between two men who carried pieces of her story, each with truths they hadn't shared. The question wasn't just who she would choose anymore, it was who was telling the truth, and what secrets had been buried beneath both of your silences all along. The air between the three of you was electric. Too many unsaid things, too many years folded into one moment. She looked from you to him, her breathing sharp and shallow. You two know each other? Her voice was low, but you could hear the tension beneath it. He smirked, like he was waiting for this. You didn't tell her, huh? He said, stepping forward just a little. That we used to be business partners, that he left me holding the bag when things went south. His words were heavy, like they'd been waiting years to be released. You kept your gaze steady, because that's not the whole story. He forgot to mention the part where he stole from the people we worked with, the part where I walked away so I wouldn't go down with him. Your voice wasn't raised, but it carried weight, enough to stop him cold. She stepped back like the ground was shifting beneath her. Everything she had rebuilt felt suddenly uncertain. She had given both of you her trust, in different ways, and now the truth sat between you like fire. So both of you kept secrets, she whispered, and you both thought I wouldn't find out. But something shifted then, something quiet but powerful. She didn't cry, she didn't run. Instead, she stood taller. The woman who once fell apart over a man was no longer standing there. She had learned how to break and rebuild. She didn't need either of you to define her anymore. I came here for closure, she said, looking at him, and I found it. But not because of anything you said, because I finally understand. I wasn't the broken one. She turned to you, her eyes steady. And you, I wanted to believe in you. I really did. But you chose silence when truth could have brought us closer. Then she walked away. Not toward either of you, but toward herself. The twist? A week later, you received a letter. No name. Just a note inside with handwriting you recognized instantly. It was from her. "I forgive you, but I need to build this empire alone." And somewhere in that silence you realized, maybe she didn't lose a king, maybe she became the queen. You held the letter in your hands for a long time, no dramatic music, no chase to the airport, just a quiet room and a message that hit harder than anything she could have said in person. "I forgive you, but I need to build this empire alone." There was no bitterness in her words, no blame, just truth. And for the first time, you realized that love isn't always about holding on. Sometimes it's about letting go with grace. He never reached out again, maybe because he knew he'd lost the last bit of power he had over her, or maybe because he finally understood she was no longer the woman who once needed his approval to feel whole. Either way, his silence said enough. His part in her story was finished, and maybe that was the most honest thing he'd ever given her, an ending. She didn't disappear after that. In fact, you started seeing her more often, on your feed, in passing mentions, always glowing in her own lane. Her business was growing, her voice was stronger, her name was being spoken in rooms she once felt too small to enter. But she didn't just build a brand, she built a life with boundaries, clarity and purpose. She didn't need someone to rescue her, she rescued herself. And as for you, you learned something too. Not just about love, but about accountability, about showing up, even when it's uncomfortable. You could have told the truth earlier. Maybe it would have changed things, maybe not. But now, you understand that trust is built in the small moments, in what's said and what's not. In the end, the story wasn't about her finding another king, or you finding your way into her heart. It was about what rises from the ashes when you stop chasing what broke you. She lost a king, yes, but in losing him, she remembered her own power. And you didn't lose her. You found something even deeper, yourself. Because sometimes the greatest empire isn't love that survives. It's strength that's reborn. And in that quiet, powerful ending, you both found what you were meant to all along. Peace, closure, and the beginning of something new, separately but whole.